and tilt if you stay centered. Stack and tilt basically is what McAvoy teaches. He calls it center. Foley teaches center. Getting into the right leg, staying centered, helping much on the other side, then getting back to center, even more that side and release. Now, let me say this. Ted Bruschi is a friend of mine who introduced Plummer and Bender to McAvoy back in 1998, 2000, 2001. Excuse me. And Ted and I had a long conversation recently on the phone. He's given me a lot of insight on what Mac has taught. I've studied McAvoy and Ben Hogan for 30 years, 35, 40 years. Hogan 40 years, McAvoy the last 25. I've been watching Mac teach probably 200 lessons. Okay? Now he has gone to an extreme. He's a little bit more into staying centered. He likes to lean into the left leg. He likes to tell him to release, and his spine has to back off at the last moment, or it won't work. So Ted told me that when Plummer and Bennett started teaching stack and tilt, they took it to the extreme where they wanted the left shoulder to lean into the left side, left leg straightening, and then from here is where you get stuck. So two things have to happen. One, you're already in front of the ball, so it becomes a disaster. Now you've got to back off the ball. It's also a disaster. This is what Ted told me. He said, Ted, that's why it didn't work with the torque players. He says, and I tried to explain to Bender and Plummer, that won't work. But they took it to the extreme. Thought I just ran with it. And all I know is there's been a ton of members from Runaway going everywhere taking lessons. Right, Mark? And Kramer will tell you the same thing. So you got to be careful when you're trying to teach an athletic move. When you're getting somebody to move on the left side, yet we throw a football by going to the right side, going down and stepping and throwing the football. Imagine throwing the football that way. It does not work. The key, if you're centering, which is what I teach centering into the right leg. And I don't mind a little shift to the right side, as long as that only moves about an inch. But what I really believe in is to get that left shoulder down and go to the left side, and then you have to release the hips, and the spine has to back up a little bit. The beauty of that is, it's like Mark said. Mark, talk about what Dr. Neal said, just for a minute. He was just really about going down and jumping up. Now, Dr. Robert Neal is the leading biomechanic in the world, #1 in the world, who's a very good friend of mine. And he was supposed to send me an email, why stack and tilt don't work. I was supposed to get it, I didn't get it Saturday night. I talked to him again this past week. I know he's a busy man, but he's coming up this year to do a seminar with me, which is my place. But Dr. Neal said, it will not work. It cannot work. And he has, what's the rest of the work? He worked not a work. That's what Dr. Neal said about jumping. Come on up here, man.
Dr. Rob Neal did what he does is he's from Australia. He goes around and he researches golf for Jimmy Wade. And he actually built a 3D motion sensor where K-Best has three freedoms, his has 6. His measures lateral, vertical, the whole spectrum. They did some intense studies, and one thing they did right away, they were talking about a boxer. And what they did was in really high shutter speed, they had a boxer just throwing jabs. And what Rob Neal said to me is, now watch his right hand when he throws jabs. Even on high shutter speed, his hand went backwards before it went forwards. He said, obviously a knockout punch, the hand went really far back and went really far forward. So every athletic motion requires an action-reaction. For maximum velocity into a golf ball or a punch, you load up, you deliver. Okay? Or what we teach, center, and when you turn into your right side, you lower to your right side. And to me, stacking your weight left is just as bad as stacking your weight right. We don't think you should stack your weight anyway. stay very centered and just rotate your body will create the optimal pivot. The other thing he talked about then was, where does power come from? Where does true power come from? And he said, you want to want the ground to be like a trampoline. He said, you want to use the ground up. Now, I really never understood that. I heard many people say, yeah, you want to start, your swing from the ground up. And he goes, well, think about this. If you get in dog posture, okay? He said, now just think about a vertical jump. Just think about jumping vertically. He said, if I have too much weight on my hips, how high can I jump? I said, not very high. He said, where do you go? He says, you have too much weight on your hips, how high can you jump? I said, you can't jump too high. If you have too much weight on your left side, if you have too much weight on your right side, you cannot jump very high. You cannot use your legs. He said, if you start centered, okay, how high can you jump here? I'm like, I can get max up. He's like, well, that's an athletic posture. If the person in your setup position cannot jump as high as they possibly can, they're not in the most athletic posture possible. I said, okay. I said, well, how's that relate to backswing? He said, the same thing. He said, if you take it in your backswing and you stop and ask yourself one question, can you jump high from there? I'm like, yeah. He said, now do this. How high can you jump? I said, well, I can't jump very high. I'm stacked left. Vice versa. If I get too far and my weight moves outside my right side, I can't jump very high. So to me, staying centered means my spine is quiet, I'm athletic, I can turn right here, and then right there I can start the downswing in a jumping sequence. You all heard the Sam's knee squat? You watch every tour player in a downswing, both knees are slightly bent. Why? Because they're starting their motion from a jumping sequence. If you cannot jump or create a lot of lift from setup or backswing, you're not in the optimal power position. That came from Rob Nick.
Okay.
Now you are
Marty Nowicki. I'm not.
Marty.
Yes.
Get up here.
Great.
You're from New York.
Yeah. I heard the last.
That's a problem.
TPI research, this is pretty interesting as far as the validated the jumping. Vertical leap, chest pass with vertical leap, chest pass with a medicine ball, and overhead throw with a medicine ball. Those three tests alone, when they're measured, how high somebody can jump, how far the ball goes, etc., with a certain percentage of body weight, etc., predict within 2 miles an hour ball speed. So is vertical leap relevant? Relative to what he's saying? Yes, actually, TPI is going to validate that there's 3 athletic measurements that tell you basically how far you can jump off. So, pretty interesting.
Thanks, Tom. This is Marty. Introduce yourself.
Marty Nowicki. From the Central Air section here, a few years ago, I used to be in the Phillies section and spent some time in that section.
Two-time teacher of the year.
2 times each of the year. 1999, 2000, spent a couple years working for Jim McLean. 2003, flew out to Houston and Scottsdale about 5 times to see Jim Hardy and Michael Bowe, and which kind of prompted me in studying what Jim Hardy was talking about with the 1.2 plane to call an old friend of mine that I went to high school with, Mike Bennett. And Mike and Andy are great friends of mine. And I want everyone to watch, when Ted takes backswing, he stays centered, he tilts to the left. This is the only way that you stay centered, is tilting to the left. This is why. Because you're in a golf setup, no one starts with a vertical spine. You start with some amount of forward tilt. In order for this point to stay in one place, there has to be some sort of side tilt to the side. Go ahead and take your backswing there. Great. Actually, if you could, as if you were hitting a ball into the hitting the ball that way. I'm sorry. I'm just hitting the ball that way. Yeah. Great. Can everyone see how much side tilt there is? Here I am standing. Here I tilt to the side. Do his shoulders and my shoulders match right now? Okay, which then leads to a premise. All of Mike and Andy's students, and what's interesting is why it does work, they have 9 different guys that have gone from obscurity to winning on the PGA Tour. Bill Lundy just won at our, I teach at the Turning Stone Resort.
Aaron Badley?
What's that?
Aaron Bassett?
Well, here's a couple great stories that not too many people know about. The photo shoot, when Golf Digest did their original shoot, Aaron Badley stayed very centered in his backswing. Kept his weight about 50-50. The photo shoot for Golf Digest, some editor said, oh, it'll work better if we take photos of him looking like that. Trust me. Well, Aaron never moved to the left. When you demonstrate it, you're moving to the left. Aaron never moved to the left. If you look at his swing from 2005, 6, 7, 8, when he met with Mike and Andy, he never did. Can you make your backswing again, please?
Same way.
Yeah. So we've got a side tilt that happens to be turned. Can everyone see that?
That's two different things.
No.
It's two different things. Here's what you're doing. Okay, this is what you're tilting. You're this way.
No.
Yes, you are. When you did your side tilt, this is exactly what you did. When he did his, he had a reverse catch.
Okay, what you just demonstrated there lacked side tilt. If I never tilted to the side, my golf swing would look like this. How many tour players would
Now, you guys chime in on this.
please do it?
You guys trying to please do it. Now, is my head moving? Okay, it's shining. I did not do this. Did anyone see my head move or did my spine move? Yes, right? How about this one? Did my head move?
No.
All right, ready? So 3D, little 3D.
3D.
Oh, 3D, ready? Bend, side bend, right? And rotation. Three directions. The golf swing is a combination of, we start this posture roughly, we'll argue about exactly where, but we stand up, so we lose our bend. We go from PGA Tour average of 40 degrees of bend, okay, we stand up.
Yeah.
Right? We stand up, PGA Tour average stands up to 7. They go from 40 to 7 degrees of bend. They don't go negative, right? So it's not, there's no reverse line, whatever. Okay. There's also obviously rotation. So we stand up, we rotate, and we side bend. It has to happen. All three happen. Now, how many degrees of each? We can debate, we can argue about it, whatever, but all three things happen. I think to have the conversation is helpful to think in all those points, basically.
Agreed.
Right? So stand up, rotate, side bend. PGA Tour averages start at 40 degrees of bend. They also average at the top 42 degrees of side bend. Getting the matching is like an in posture look.
But,
when Dr. Hill, who sat down with Mark and I for 2 hours, he showed
and I have the email.
and gave us all the information. Gave us all the information, and he had the 3D and so forth. He said, now watch this. All the models, it showed that every model in 3D, it showed the weight movement to the inside, back, right, left. So it never showed that anyone was turning this way.
None of Mike and Andy's students do what you just demonstrated.
And that's why Mike Ware can't play anymore, and that's why Batty went to where he's going.
Wait a second.